Who the heck was this man? And why should we care about him? Welcome to Coffee with Coach. My name is Steve Petty, and I have 3 goals for these videos: to help you become a better church leader, to save you time and money, to help educate, energize, and motivate you to energize and motivate your church. To start off today, before we even get into anything, I have a challenge for you. So get out your paper and pencil. I'm going to show you 10 more people. If you know who they are, write down their names. Number 1, you've already seen just a few seconds ago. I'll show you each face for 5 seconds, then we'll move on. Pause the video if you need to go get paper. Ready, set, here we go. So the problem is, what do you do with all those ethnic highlight months? February, Black History Month, one prime example. This is something really new. In 1973, when I began ministry, there were none of these. Today there are several, and I think we have 3 options when we address them as preachers. 1, we can ignore them entirely. Hardly anyone will notice. Very little downside. Or 2, make it your prime emphasis. Some people will be put off. Some people will be very supportive. Or 3, you can make it a secondary theme. Keep your eye on the gospel and your regular planned sermon series, but use key examples of Black historical figures. Keep in mind the idea is to combat racial stereotypes and build an appreciation for the racial group emphasized. So I tend to lean toward number 3. And maybe, in some years, number 2. Today, I'm assuming you've got your sermons already planned for February, which is Black History Month, so I'm suggesting a number 2 position this year. I think racism is a huge problem in our country. I've experienced racism in my own upbringing. I know the dynamics that swirl around racial opinions in the home. I've also fought racism in several organizations that I was a part of, beginning way back in the 1960s. And no matter what I did, the racists won. It was more than disappointing, and I had to leave several of those organizations. It is very upsetting to me that racism of all stripes is still prevalent in the world today. So I would be clear about that if I was preaching today. We, who believe that Jesus came to save the whole world and valued all the people that he encountered, have to be forthright in our denouncement of all kinds of racism. So here are some suggestions for Black History Month. The idea isn't to bludgeon the racist in your church with the sinfulness of their position, but rather to entice them to understand how racism is hurtful to all people and undermines the very society we all want to create. First idea is tell your own story. Where have you encountered racial discrimination against Black people personally? If you don't have personal experiences with this, just ask a Black friend to read you in. Second option is to keep it real, but keep it light. Okay, I want to actually endorse a really good book. You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey by Amber Ruffin and Lacey Lamar. Amber Ruffin is a regular contributor to Seth Meyers and a writer on his show, but she also has her own show on the NBC network. Stories in this book are real-life stories that are just hard to believe, but they're written in a humorous way. Some of her stories have made it into YouTube videos or Seth Meyers sections, or Late Night with Seth Meyers, or Google, or just Google Amber Says What. Or number 3, Into your planned sermon series, add relevant examples of Black people who have lived influential lives. Let me give you some examples. Influential Christian leaders: Sojourner Truth, Harry Hosier, James Weldon Johnson, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesse Jackson. Influential sports figures: Jesse Owens, Jack Johnson, Jackie Robinson, Willie O'Ree, Muhammad Ali, Pele, Hank Aaron, Tony Gwynn, Wilma Rudolph, Charlie Sifford, Serena Williams. Influential artists: Count Bassie, Scott Joplin, Josephine Baker, Lena Horne, Louis Armstrong, Paul Robeson, Marian Anderson, Billie Holiday, Harry Belafonte, Misty Copeland. Black American composers: William Grant Still, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, George Walker, Francis Johnson, Wynton Marsalis. Political figures: Mansa Musa, Haile Selassie, Jomo Kenyatta, Abel Muzorewa, Nelson Mandela, Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, Colin Powell, Barack Obama. You can Google all these people and find them in Wikipedia. There are lots of informational articles about them. You can't possibly do justice to the fullness of their lives, but you can highlight their accomplishments and appreciate their contribution to the world. The purpose of all these names, and obviously you could bring out many, many more in each one of those categories, and maybe even some more categories, is to point out how they influence the world, how that influence is alive today, how all of us are better because of the influence they brought to the world. But most importantly, how much we need Black people in our lives, making a contribution in the United States and around the world. If we are to build the world Jesus is begging us to build, we must listen to and appreciate all the people God has blessed us with today, including people with dark skin. Now, who were those 10 people at the beginning? I've mentioned several of them already. Mansa Musa, the richest man who ever lived. He controlled most of the gold in the world at the time he lived. An interesting life. Look him up. The American singer Marian Anderson. World heavyweight boxer Jack Johnson. Civil rights organizer Sojourner Truth. Poet, lyricist, civil rights worker, first leader of the NAACP, James Weldon Johnson. Realtor and philanthropist, Ora Lee Brown. If you don't know her story, you need to look it up. Jomo Kenyatta, first president of Kenya. Misty Copeland, first Black American ballerina prima of the American Ballet Theater. Willie O'Ree, first African-American hockey player in the National Hockey League. Used to watch Willie O'Ree when he was a San Diego Gull. Great guy. Look him up. And finally, Wilma Rudolph. She used to be called the world's fastest woman. These people, each in their own way, changed and shaped the world. We are all better because of their contribution. Talk about them. Share their stories. Find other Black people in your midst who you could share their story. Maybe there are some people in your congregation that you know their story, and maybe the other people in the congregation don't know. Get their permission. Share that story. It's Black History Month. Do you understand Black history? Do you understand the people that have shaped it? It's worth preaching about. Some of those sermons might change hearts, might change minds, might change the world. Well, that's it for this week. If you have suggestions or comments, please add them below or email me at steve@revstevep.com. I hope you find these videos helpful and worth sharing with colleagues. If so, I would love it if you could click on the subscribe button below and maybe even the bell so that you'll be notified when my next video drops. Plus, watch for my upcoming podcast, The Caffeinated Pulpit, starting in Lent 2022. Next week on Coffee with Coach, I'll be talking about why online worship is not going away. In fact, it's going to be more important now than ever before. See you next week on Coffee with Coach.